Yeah. Flying onto platforms. Wow. So I met this actor named Jack Dylan Grazer. If he could be in anything, what would he be in? And he said, "Oh, Star Wars." The country started to warm towards the idea of a plucky, average adventurer, main character, male, and as the plucky female adventurer character was not finding anyone to buy her video games, my mind went to an idea that I had thrown away very early. Uh, both Grazer, Jack Dylan, and I am, both he and I identify as goblins. We're both like, yeah, we're kind of goblin-like, no problem. So when he said Star Wars, I was like, man, they're not going to make a Yoda movie and then put you in CG as like a realistic, like, wow, that's like super sci-fi. He looks like a human being, but at the same time, see, when people imagine young Yoda, for some reason their brain is broken and they think that young Yoda would be short and wrinkly. That's why you have Grogu, who's short and wrinkly, but Grogu is a baby. Babies look like old people. The idea that a teenage Yoda would be like, how old is baby Grogu? Like 50 years or 100 years or something? So the Grogu Yoda species, they live a very long time. But there is no logical reason to imagine that these would look short and wrinkly when they are in their middle age. They old people shrink, and Yoda looks very old. He looks very shrunk. One of the depictions shows him kind of lanky, but his feet are still proportionately too big, and so I was thinking, okay, maybe you could do a Jack Dylan Grazer playing a young Yoda, and a young Yoda isn't young. Like there's no such thing as a young Yoda. He was really old when he was a baby, as we see with Grogu. I think like 500 years old at the time of the prequels, something like that. Uh, I wrote a story for Jack Dylan Grazer based on the Bright Netflix movie that was basically just uh, another version of Shadowrun. I don't go in for RPG playing because I'm a Christian. I don't play Dungeons and Dragons. Um, I saw the Bright movie. It was okay. It was a little bit lacking. it was somewhat lacking relatability. The American Family Man father character has become so unbelievable that Hollywood has had to make television shows about stunt people because there's no more American middle class to relate to. And the only American middle class that we have left are these like um, cordoned off sections of each ruling group has their own section of protected middle class people. And Hollywood has stuntmen and adjacent characters. But I made a bright sequel pitch based on a sort of a goblin royalty, sort of like a gangster prince character, like magical. And he's very much a magical parasite. Um, but unlike a parasite, he's choosing to like navigate his environment using various charms. His big deal is charms, like little tchotchkes all over his person. And one of his gimmicks is that he's not a shapeshifter, but when you're looking at him, he looks like different people to different people. He doesn't physically change. He just amogs at a quantum mechanical level. Um, like a bad goblin royalty gangster prince, Silicon Valley slacker villain who loses at the end, but it's fine. At the end, his fingernail grows really long, and he puts it right into Will Smith's forehead. He's just like blah. It's all lightning and shit. He's like blah, and then he like goes to the Darklands. And he wins sort of. Eh. When the bad guy demon character grabs the wizard's golden fate helmet, the a character in the audience went like aha, like they were watching a detective movie. I was like, this isn't a fucking detective movie. Just sit and enjoy the ride. Why are you wondering about the freaking code base of the morality of how anyone wins? Like somebody was sitting in the audience going, details and thinking. I felt so bad. If I go on social media and talk about 4DX, it feels like I'm interacting with Kryptonians that are trapped in the Phantom Zone. That because they're in a 2D interface of the screen, that I can't get them to to grok or comprehend the value of life experience. The value of life experience. The language of the social media characters is just dominant. It's like if I were really gunning for that sort of experience, I would just go outside and touch grass. I was like, yeah, I thought that too. But then I realized that everyone, myself and everyone, were watching the world go by from the couch, and that no one really talks to anyone, and that the entire American culture has been about content and content creation, and how content creation relates to our emotionality. And then I kind of, I was like, oh yeah, it really is not about touching grass or gunning for anything. What the fuck are you talking about? But that's what it's like when I talk to people on social media. It's like they're flat. I realized going to the theater after COVID and from being homeless in Portland, Oregon, that the bodies in public that they only ever talk about painful things. So that if you do happen to be outside and lonely and you are like constantly exposed to the environment, that you have to hear people complaining all the time about everything. And you could be bragging, boasting, asking for help, but they will always think that you're complaining. Um, but I realized that if you go to the movies, it's one of the only times where you see people enjoying themselves in public. Like, oh, when you eat ice cream, it tastes good to you too. When it's a sunny day and you go outside and warm, your skin feels good just like my skin feels good in the sun too. Oh, I thought that everyone was just like eating broken glass and just going, I'm more miserable than you. Haha. I thought that that was what everybody was doing. I thought that everyone was built different. And that, as a mammal, that I don't even wonder if it's enjoyable for other people to see other people enjoy themselves. That's not even a question. Of course it's enjoyable to watch other people enjoy themselves, obviously, except for one girl. There's one girl you do not take to the 4DX movie theater. Okay, she's little, and when you take her to the 4DX movie theater, she's going to be shocked. She's going to look around and see people enjoying themselves, and she'll get upset and she will throw herself, her little frail body, off of the 4DX seat and land cocone head neck first onto her own goodbye. Do not take that girl to the 4DX theater. And if you do, they take her to Times Square because they have seatbelts. You know what your opinion is on me? That he's crazy. I never would throw my stupid face down on the floor because everybody else is having fun and it's not about me. You just absorb guilt. Anyway, I don't know what we would make a Yoda movie about. I sure would like to make that Bright sequel with social camouflage and basically explaining why, when you speak to people, you absorb their accent, and that the paperwork and television screens and the people that are on the television screens and the people on the paperwork, they don't have to understand. Poor Kamala Harris, she waded into she waded into real life. She gave the world a hope and a boldness to face thermonuclear annihilation with a chuckle. Man, uh, oh, that is sort of a miss sound. Uh, So sometime around 15 to 7, I got tired of playing shooty games, shooty, pew 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 pew. Got tired of that. Um, thank God I was an adolescent, uh, because as I sort of got tired of shooty games, we'll call them pew pew games, pew pew pew. When I got tired of murder simulators, uh, there were a bunch of people who were hoping to make video games that were grabbing a hold of a social ladder called artistic or aesthetics or artistry, art, culture, sort of adjacent to education. And they were like, oh well, things have like artistic merit, cultural value, challenges, puzzle challenges, brain work, or brain, what is it, brain workouts or something like that, brain exercises, mind workouts. Anyway, MYST, nonviolent, artistic, incredibly difficult, plain, obvious, simple, easy. There's one skill that if I told it to you, it would be like cheating at MYST. And the reason why I like MYST is because I would be good at doing this, but that I don't do this and that I don't have this skill. If I was allowed to have study skills. And growing up, I fought really hard to find out what the curse word is, this thing called scholastic ability. And I remember I asked this Indian girl who was good at schoolwork how she was good at schoolwork, and she said that her parents would kill her. And then sometime before that or after that, I fell onto my bed and I was so dead tired that I bounced up awake, and it was the next day. And I went and I told my parents, I was like, yo, I just hit the bed and bounced. And when I bounced up, it was the next day. I was like, you think somebody put like a spear gun in my bed so that when I dropped down on it, it went through my brain and I, what, do you think I reset? What do you think happened? So I met this famous dude, and I was like, work, 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 work. So I asked him, if you could be in any movie, what would you be in? And he said, oh, he was a young man. He was excited about young man things like Star Wars. I was surprised that he was excited about Star Wars. It's old. The prequels were Flash Gordon, and as boring as that old movie would be, like if you tried to watch the Flash Gordon movie now, you'd be like, oh, this is a little. Ugh. Um, Also, there's like no chemistry between Natalie Portman really didn't shine in the Star Wars prequels. Even Taika Waikiki, Take a Walk, Taika Waikiki, uh, asked Natalie Portman if she would like to be in a Star Wars movie that he was making, and she said that she was in a Star Wars movie, and he goes, "Oh yeah." So I was surprised when this young famous man said that he was excited to potentially be in a Star Wars, and I was perplexed because I felt like I could have imagined him doing anything in any film that he had asked for, but when he had asked for Star Wars, I was like, oh, but at that time, pop culture was like a it, pop culture was kamikazeing righteously for the cause of uh, progress. I was like, yeah, I don't think it's gonna work because I'm not insane, but it's your prerogative. Um, and I tried to imagine him in Star Wars, and he was quite a hobbit. Jack Dylan Grazer, he's quite a hobbit himself. So the two of us, as like average height males who are actually considered short by most dominant giant type characters, we walked down Broadway between um, maybe West 8th, and I tried to imagine him in Star Wars, and he was quite the young Yoda Goblin guy. He was quite the bold, a bold, brave man to be speaking with the yelling homeless man that was yelling at the center of the water fountain in Washington Square Park. And I thought of him as a young Yoda that I had seen the concept art for on the internet, and I was like, I kind of shrugged my shoulders. I was like, oh, they're gonna make Ahsoka. They're making the Mandalorian and the baby because they gotta sell dolls to women and children, no problem. Uh, I was like, oh, but Jack Dylan Grazer as Green with some semi magical powers with long ears as a kind of permanent teenager that that was marketable. That was a marketable idea as a side character in another person's film. And since I had been thinking in the I had been imagineering in the fish tank of Hollywood marketing and what gets greenlit and what gets money and what goes all the way to market and what actors get to have what they would like to happen and while I was thinking about that and what I was thinking what actors who don't, I was thinking about Will Smith and I was like, well, you know what? Why don't we? Excuse me. I was like, why don't we? Since Will Smith is not going anywhere, he has enough money to produce his own films. And like Howie Mandel, he can run to the Christian movies that they don't really have actors going over there. Will Smith can run to the Christian movies that are uncanceling themselves these days. Christian films are uncanceling themselves quite heroically. I was trying to think of a word that sounded like heretical because I knew that you did not like it, so that it was going to sound like heretical, but it would be good. I was like, oh, heroically, quite heroically. Christian movies have been uncanceling themselves. So I thought, you know what film franchise had a lot of potential? Bright. Um, Max Landis's Shadowrun, uh, off-brand Shadowrun. film franchise possibility. So I just started writing, and at the time I was in extreme solitude, very clean spaces, empty spaces that would scream at me to really to work to fill these spaces with no television, no internet, um, and I started writing a bright sequel that now one of the reasons, see, the reasons people are canceled are not the reasons why people are canceled. Bright was too realistic. Bright was too close to how actual social structures are cutthroat, are bloodthirsty, are cutthroat. And so the reason why Max Landis was canceled was because he managed to push Bright through production on the side avenue of Netflix production early when that was still more risky towards loss, risky towards tackiness, risky towards garishness, risky towards products nobody cares about, risky towards failure. But Max Landis used all of that side avenue of risky towards failure to make something that was hot. So then he was canceled so that Bright would only be in a couple of theaters, and then half of those theaters themselves were canceled. On the internet, they have this meme: you'll never know what it's like to sit at the Sunshine movie theater on Houston just so that you could be alone and feel the feels. You'll never you'll never know what it's like to go into the movie theater with the orange lights that looks at Houston and to look at the pillars that are squatting. There are these Roman pillars that are squatting a chunk of land on 2nd Avenue in Houston by the park. So I thought of you know, if we're going to give Jack Dylan Grazer a film where a boy can be cool in the front of the camera, that at that time I was like, the closest that I could get for you is to be the bad guy in a movie that's going to itself be risky, and the movie has to be financed by an actor that this is his last hurrah and his apology. So here's the thing. The movie Bright is actually where Will Smith went wrong. Let me explain. Will Smith did not want to be in buddy comedy cop movies for the rest of his life. Bad Boys, the movie, was like a last resort. You could give Will Smith 15 years of and say, yeah, I'm going to do a one for me. And the one for me is that he goes and gets Martin Lawrence and does Bad Boys 2. It's only ever when it's like, oh man, I don't know if I can make movies anymore. Nobody wants to work with me. Let me go and work with Martin, who ran down the highway in his drawers. Martin Lawrence ran down the LA highway in his drawers. So Will Smith was doing Bright. Bright was like an amazing film, but he didn't. Will Smith did not put the entire Will Smith machine behind Max Landis and Bright. He didn't bet Men in Black toy money on Bright, and he could have. He could have done. He could have, but he didn't. And actually, we know why he didn't, because The Rock and Vin Diesel were both. What happened to The Rock and Vin Diesel over the last 6 years is unspeakable, and I don't call anything unspeakable. I did other videos about it. You have to look them up. So I thought, okay, we could do like almost self-funded. I apologize, um, Will Smith movie where it's Bright, a sequel to Bright, and since it was me writing it, I was like, well, I might as well write a story that is culturally forbidden, and that is the idea of class barriers and appearance. Uh, and this came, I don't want to say naturally, this came paranaturally from the goblin character that I saw as a villain in the Bright movie. And I wrote a story about, classic punk rock, uh, magical genius living in an abandoned building with a bunch of candles, and he kind of shapeshifts, and he moves through like Silicon Valley tech jobs and various black markets, and who even knows who he really is. Smooth operator, diamond life. But at the time, I wasn't thinking about Sade because I was thinking, oh, this is really risky and everyone's going to be offended. I was thinking about stuff I've seen, like little Italian gangster styled green um, goblins in Shadowrun, or little corners of fantasy worlds, or maybe offshoots of Harry Potter bank goblins that are mobsters that you would see in what they tried to do with Fantastic Beasts. That the first one was good because it was in New York, and everything else was just ugh. Um, so I wrote this whole story for this. I typed this all out with voice to text, and I edited it up, and I don't know where this goes. But let's talk about MYST, you guys. Why am I go? I think that I would rather approach MYST from the fantasy element because um, and this is, how do we tell children that no generation before ours would tolerate them? That they would not, no one would have allowed them to exist anywhere else, anyone else but here and now. In 300, we had the story of the deformed baby that gets thrown off the ledge, and it comes back and it betrays the nation and is scary people's. He's like, eh. So, but that's confusing because it has to do with his right, because he is of that race. So it kind of tells you this. So that's not how I don't. Ugh. When you watch a story about like a little town in Boston or something, No one's like, hey, I'm from the, I have a right. Nobody says that. Nobody's racist. Even when they're racist, they're not racist. They're just angry and stupid and smart. Even in like the Boston Mafia movies where they're like, hey, I got a Boston accent and I'm a white guy and I don't like people who are the other people. You Guido. Even then, they're not like, my mom's paperwork says that I got off the Mayflower and I'm allowed to live in this neighborhood. If they do it privately. They don't go, bleh. But this, you know, if I were to approach Mist, I would approach Mist from the fantasy setting because wondering what is and is not possible is other people's problem. Yeah, I'm not I'm live streaming, but there's no one watching me, so it's really I'm just recording to the cloud. And uh uh there's a schizoid who is chiming in helpfully like a dog that barks when you're yelling on the phone. When you're a quiet person and you're in your house and you're on the phone and you yell at someone on the phone and the dog starts barking because the dog thinks that it is the only thing that's allowed to have emotional expressions. That's that entered that kind of instinct, the environmental variables that would bring about that instinct from out of a chaotic system are bringing about from the chaotic system of the background are bringing about a helpful chiming in schizoid. Excuse me. Um, so when I think about what is fantastically possible in the narrative of fantasy, what's believable, what has worked for, what feels natural, what feels like it has an inherent morality to the story. Um, and then we kind of WROUGHT. It is wrought to the genre of science fiction fantasy, and we kind of almost tame the fantasy elements down to more folksy folksy membranes and folksy uh, mediums and objects, like a book with a picture on it that teleports, or a bowl with diodes attached to it that creates a hologram that's an image inducer. Um, so one of the things that focuses MYST from just outright wish fulfillment fan fiction hokum or hokel or hoker or hoken hokey whatever stuff, what stops it from being hokey is the taste for realism in the 1990s gaming market, the purchasing dollar, the customer. That's what I forgot. I forgot the customer because you guys forgot yourself. You're right back. So I felt like I had to have life experiences that I could write about from my life experiences so that I would have a right to write about that. And that's not what works. Um, what works is reading a little bit and just making stuff up and being from a social position where no one will call you on it and making money and the fear of getting caught motivating you to use your social position to defend yourself on all sides and to gain more and more power and to make your past work more and more obscure so that your actual identity can be a mystery and therefore more intimidating. But two journalists completely fell apart during the same time. A journalist who was portrayed by Christian uh, Hayden Christensen and another journalist named Glass, I believe. Two journalists were found out to be completely fictitious liars, and it became sort of a thing for the internet to sort of stalk and chase and verify all of the news. Um, and then calling people out on the internet became sort of like a like fireworks displays. You would just go on the internet and you would just watch pew, pew, people being called out. Um, and then the news became like a very live thing at Occupy. And actually, I didn't really think of myself as a writer. I found that investing in my own life was like putting water in a bucket with a hole in it. Um, so I went to a Bible verse that I had already read, that it was already a part of my value system, and that was when you have money to invest in the kingdom. And so I decided to just be the best friend that I could be to the most quality people that I could vet or that I could uh, initiate. I think that's the correct word. I'm using it in the Masonic sense. The best friends that I could either help or protect, either vet or initiate. One second. And a friend of mine, she showed me this picture of this boy that she was going to start dating. And she said, "Oh, look, he's beautiful." And I did not understand what she was expressing as far as his face was concerned. Um, he looked like an average guy with small eyes and a masculine jaw and straw-colored hair. Um, maybe you think that's why. Um, um, oh, and her boyfriend was an artist, so she goes, "Oh, why don't you write like a web comic? Not why don't you write a zine comic, and then he'll draw it, and then we'll sell it at the merch table." So I go and I look up this boy's website, and he has, an adequate college graduate artist comic artist website. You go to his name on .com, and it's got a couple of examples of his art, and it's got a couple of sequential stories, and you read. It's like, okay, some rabbit, some Alice in Wonderland derivative. Cool, cool. Everyone was into that those days. Cool, cool. Williamsburg was really into the Alice in Wonderland stuff. Cool, little rabbit running through a rabbit with a mask, and he's chasing. Cool, cool. In a sort of a wood carving, gray, black and white style. Cool. So I'm like, okay. So I go to sleep. I have a fairly vivid dream. I have vivid dreams sometimes, but sometimes I have short dreams, and so I go, okay. I go to sleep. I have a fairly vivid dream, somewhat eerie, maybe a little scary. And I'm not an artist, but I take a pen and I very carefully, because I don't want to mess up. It's a pen. I very carefully draw basic symbols of what I saw, so I don't mess up the shapes, basic shapes, and that I don't mess up. Okay, this shape, and sequentially, and I give it to him. And I don't know what happens until like 3 years later. What I didn't realize until years later was that he immediately, so this boy was like one of these college boys that gets a van and goes and moves to the mountains and camps out at the mountains over and over again, takes wonderful pictures, and girls go with them in their camper van to the mountains. And then they have a job at some granola store in some mountain town somewhere, or they do advertising, Photoshop, print work in some town somewhere lower down the mountain or whatever. And as soon as I showed him the drawings, I didn't know this until much later, that as soon as I showed him the drawings of the dream I had, that they were very rudimentary, almost cave painting outlines of the dream I had. It was some Star Trek stuff with some childhood imagery and some crayons. Cool stuff. Cool shit. Cool hipster shit that they would have loved. Sorry, this is the only curse word. This is for kids. Sorry. Um, as soon as I showed him these outlines for drawings that he could illustrate, and these stories that I wrote for him, that he got in his van and he ran back to the mountain. I didn't notice this because he's one of these boys that he goes to the college graduate girl and he goes, "Hey, why don't you drop everything and why don't you move into my van and live in my camper van?" And she asked me, she's like, she's like, "Hey, this boy graduated from college. A lot of friends that are working with you nowadays." She goes, "Yeah." I go, "You got business prospects? You got a job in an apartment?" She goes, "Yeah." I was like, "Yeah, I don't know if going into his van and going and living up the mountain. I don't know. If, I don't. No, I don't see the point of that." And early '90s values. When we were young, we knew everything. Teenage pregnancy and being a responsible parent and making money first. All those American values that don't work. Anyway, what were we talking about? MYST, T. One of the things that I love about MYST was the high standard of verisimilitude that the customers from the 90s brought to the market, that they had grown up with paintings on the front covers of video games and pixelated artwork on the back of the game box, whatever it's called. The product packaging. Uh, Class biased industry lingo infuriates me. So it's hard for me to use it naturally. Um, and the way that kind of squished into the circuitry of 90s video games was that when you click on something, if it doesn't move or do anything, if you can't look at it, then it's not real. We would say it's not real. It's just a part of the scenery. It doesn't move. Like a cycling GIF of a window with trees moving. There's no outside space being rendered. It's just a flat image that has an animation on it. Uh, yeah. And the simulation of MYST is not really a word that we use in a sentence like that. The granularity of the interactivity. There really isn't novice. Thank you. There really isn't novice language for expressing your video game standards. Amateur. And I feel like at times the entire game industry has like lost its way in a lot of ways. And since all I have is effect, the most effective thing I can give as an example is the game Destiny by Bungie. Now, the game that you get when you buy Destiny is not the actual Destiny game. The actual Destiny game that is fun is the game that the alpha devs and the beta devs are playing against each other. That's the actual fun game. And in that game there are a lot of bugs, but no one's trying to break the game except in a way that wins the game, and they've turned that into weapons, and they're all editing the game on the fly, using the game to edit the game. The game you get is last year's RPG game, whittled down to a shippable size and troubleshot to a shippable quality, and then the people who are punished are dispatched to do uh, tech support on the product that they're going to launch. And the people that are punished that don't learn their lesson are assigned to do PR for the product that they're doing tech support for. And you can know this because when you're running through the environment, they have wires that are on the ground that are bent in a way that when you're moving, even though the model of your character is blocky, that it feels like the top of your foot is getting stuck on the wires. That's because they have a more in-depth engine that they're playing with all kinds of deformation of the models of the environment. But that's too dangerous for gameplay. That it'll break the game. That you'll progress through the game, breaking the game instead of progressing through the game by being a warrior. And the reason why that they can do this, and the reason why they do this, is because the customers are the only thing that makes money in the market is a grind fest where people lobotomize themselves by playing the game so they can be emotionally and hand-eye coordinated to play the game, or cheaters who are also sacrificing a part of their humanity to cheat, or people that have a business model to pay third world country people to play the game and then sell the and just grind through as much as they can and use the social aspect of the game to, instead of make relationships, to kind of like glom a bunch of product together and then sell it so that all of this makes money, because people don't want to play the game because the game is so not fun, and that this complicated grind fest marketplace is the only thing that sells. It's the only thing that will continually pay the rent of these game developers, and that's what they have. And there is no more market for artistic nonviolent games because nobody's playing games. Nobody's playing video games. Everyone was playing video games, and now no one is playing video games. And no one's going to the movies, and no one's going to go. And now everything's changed because no one is going to the movies with the girl that has the same culture as you. No, that girl in the movies, that she's dressed like you and she looks like you, and in the character she says she has the same value systems as you, and that she comes from the same country as you, and she's the same age as you, and she has to deal with problems that are super powered, but kind of like the problems you have to deal with, but different. No one's going to see those movies. No, life's a video game. You want to see? You want to see a boppy avatar that's waiting to get bopped? You want to see a boppy guy? That his life is just a video game until he get. You want to see it? Yeah, I didn't like violent video games because life is a standoff enough already, all the time. And it's only fun for a little while to imagine that you could progress through life by going pew 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 pew. That's only fun for a little while, and then you go, man. You progress through life. Your desire to progress through life. You don't know what story is. You don't know what story is that you're constant. No, I'll tell you why you don't. Because you don't believe in class mobility. You know better than to give yourself a social hernia trying to do the impossible by trying to change your lot in life. So why should you go to movies? Why you don't like stories? No one progresses through any story. They assign you a wife. It's like you get arrested, but you get to go outside. You have to pay rent. There's this little thing that looks like you, and now you're in trouble. And that's it. And there is nothing else. And the story of American freedom and the story of abolition and slavery and all that stuff, those are just stories. Go to work. And in fact, those stories, you don't understand them. And if you talk about them, you get in trouble. Freedom, those stories get you in trouble. Slavery, abolition, those words get you in trouble. That's it. That's it. American freedom, slavery, and abolition, you got to say it like you don't know what you're talking about with the, or else you get in trouble. Anyway, realism, huh? You know, they don't, when they play the game of MYST, they don't get away. So because they don't get away, they are not in the emotional momentum of getting away. So they watch the movie and they don't get away. They don't get it to get away. They play the video game, they don't get away. They don't get it to get away. So they're looking for they're like, oh, like, well, steampunk um and circuit boards and uh and weighted stones tied to ropes and balances and what else and Rube Goldberg machines and what else and guilt and naughty and morality plays. And how does that work? And then the quantum mechanics of the linking and then layered in there is the social striations of the jokes that they don't explain. What was her name? The Galaxy girl from Rick and Morty. The Galaxy girl superhero from Rick and Morty, not Planetina. Galax. She was like some sort of galaxy girl, Nova Prime or something like that. No, that's from Marvel. Supernova. So yeah. um so she got upset and she killed her teammates because they were so clicky and they had little in jokes that they wouldn't explain. So yeah, so in between all the stuff that you can't understand or that you don't understand, that you don't get, is all the stuff that you compensate for what you don't get by pretending that there is something that you do get. It's all real clicky, like um, why you like steampunk and um, why you like puffy shirts and fencing in your steampunk, as if that has to do with ecosystems or class warfare. Because the thing about MYST is that it is very. The thing about MYST is what's so hilarious about MYST is that it is entirely about class warfare, and that it isn't entirely controlled by somebody's stepdaughter. There's no way that you can deny either one of those things. It's just you can't escape from if MYST is a trap, it's the trap that you cannot pretend that the MYST stories are about anything other than like liberation, class warfare, and that sort of freedom. and you can't pretend that the, the the company is controlled by anybody other than the guy's stepdaughter. So I like to come at the MYST franchise from the fantasy elements, but what I don't like is um, heroes who are fighting because they don't understand something. I don't like uh, conflict that is because of misunderstandings. I find that to be gender biased. That the entire reason why that misunderstandings are an acceptable reason for conflict in stories is because the word misunderstanding sounds like it's a girl, and for no other reason. If you call it stupid, then you're a sinner and you're a bad person and God is angry at you. But if you call it a misunderstanding, then it's okay. And it's just um, semantics or rhetoric, and it's infuriating that um, human life experience is so meaningless that that what has more meaning and more effect in life is the effect of the constant reiteration of words and the bitter jokes that they create, and that those bitter jokes that words make are more influential than entire people's lives. I don't like that. I'm living one individual life. It has to mean something to me that I'm living it. Um, I don't know why that the so-called fans of the MYST franchise do not understand that the characters from the MYST novels have left, that they have abandoned the camera, the narrative. They said, you're interested in MYST? You're interested in Dunny? We are not interested in MYST or in Dunny. We don't want to have nothing to do with any of that. Linking books or nothing. Goodbye. That I don't know why that the MYST fans that they don't understand that. Because the last book, it was entirely like, this is too much. This is too much for us to deal with. We can't go traipsing around universes using Nara suits to make sure that we don't accidentally throw ourselves in the middle of a sun. We're going to exit the story. And then that the market itself sucked so bad that Strange Worlds came out. And Strange Worlds is borderline, obviously, not so much low key because it's a big film franchise that they were trying to make. Uh, Borderline, obviously, like the continuation of the survivors of the MYST franchise. The guy looks like Atris, and he sounds like um, Jeff Bridges, even though he's being voiced by the guy who did Ronald Reagan. I don't remember his name right now. You know, and I don't know why that this is not gotten grokked, that they don't get it, that it isn't understood, misunderstood, comprehended, provided synthesis for, consented to, agreed upon, or canonized officially. I don't know why it isn't. Um, but when I wrote a story for MYST, I pretty much just said, as thorough as Atris was, you cannot account for people who have adequately cut themselves off from the cavern, but that after everything is said and done, after MYST and all those characters leave, that some characters find a linking book and link back into the cavern from either the Dunny era or even a pre-Dunny era. Instead of the supposed fan base that's like, we want the Book of Marim. We want a book about a character that closes the door on her universe and says, I'm not interested in this universe anymore. Goodbye. Stop writing stories about me, and closes the door. And you would like stories about her. I don't know what you're playing at, I know that Marum almost is the same thing backwards and forwards, almost the same thing, and that Rand is RM. I know, and Mirror, that, and that Zach, one of the Zachs that I met, did this thing called Mirrors, as if the game being lonely is not isolating enough, and everybody going massively multiplayer online game was not a clear enough request from the customer base, the actual paying customers, the market. Sorry, the market. So I just pick up after Atris leaves with Dunny that have come back, that have like learned their lesson, and they're sort of Atris like, they're not Gen like, and they live in the paradigm of public Dunny life as Gen told it to Atris, even though Gen did not know anything about actual Dunny life because he was in like preschool. He was in Dunny preschool, and the stories that he told Atris were like preschool stories of Dunny life, and that Uru is supposed to tell you that actually Dunny was exactly like Terrani, even though that doesn't make any sense because they specifically separated themselves and it looked different, so thematically it would be different. And that they did have slaves or something. That's horrible. And Escher's like, I'm a late 17th era Victorian colonialist for some reason. And I'm like, yeah, I know, I get it. I don't know if you can hear this lady screaming, who are you talking to? Who are you talking to? But I have headphones on and I can hear her through my own voice. No, it was that lady over there that's saying that. It's that lady. I wasn't talking about you. What? Do you want to admit that you are anti-American, anti-life, wild animal, high level? Do you want to tell everyone that the idea of people is fake and that you are a predator wearing clothes and you don't even know why? Somebody's just bothering me right now. Anyway, so what are we talking about? Oh, so I just brought in the old Dunny who naively behave like civilized that naively behave like civilized, non-empirical, non-colonialist, scientist, good-natured Clinton era good guys. You know, it's just there are a lot of other people that can hear what I'm saying, and I specifically have in front of me the words "for kids," and the only thing that I said in the last 3 minutes or the last 5 minutes that might be risky is me describing you, at me asking me and you. The only thing that has been naughty is what you have inspired. There's no security up here for a reason because everything's fine. There is a psychopath here that looks like a mommy, and the environment that I'm in, that because I am male and because I am projecting with my voice into the microphone, and because I am talking about grown up topics such as the things that people write about for grown up content, but I am specifically making sure that it's PG. Of course, in public school, you are allowed to learn about politics and American history. These are specifically public school level topics, but for a wild, angry animal, anything that remotely wakes up the child brain of memories, that when they used to be a person, anything that potentially wakes them up, it gives them an idea that they can go growl and growl and act like a mommy and go, he bad, me have power. And they have no interactions except to do that. So there's no accountability for them. if I went down and told the security guard that this person is threatening me, they would laugh. They would say, "Sorry that you think that social accountability is gender equal. It ain't." So, I really like the anti-colonialist sentiments of the MYST franchise. I really like the pro-indigenous people and pro-indigenous culture and pro ingenuity, creativity, problem solving, adapting around uh, restrictions, adapting around um, deaf, dumb, and blind, unintelligent, ruling tyranny. These are the stories that we as Americans would like back when we liked stories, back when we believed that there was such a thing as anything, back when we believed that there was such a thing as class mobility, back when we believed that if we had a child at a teenager, that would hinder our ability to work hard and give ourselves things that our parents did not have because we believed in class mobility. So we believed that being responsible actually was a choice and actually had benefits instead of thinking that being responsible is that you are in prison, that you have to be responsible or else, and that you should not expect anything except that you are not starving. That's it. That you are not starving and not freezing to death, and that's all you have. And they assign you a female, and then you have a little thing that looks like you, and you are now in trouble for the rest of your life. They can't use their words, they cannot speak. Why is it that you can speak to that person and that person can act like that you are a citizen and a person, but that you cannot speak to me? Because the audience at home already knows what's upsetting you. Topics that talk about families and having children and men having decisions, and that topic being empowered in the marketplace where families and buying power is directed by an individual who likes what they like. I like what I like. So that entire thing is offensive. And now she has other things on her mind. Now the body that's threatening me is going, "Oh, I'm not thinking about you. It's a schizoid. It's not a person." Yeah, when I'm in my own private tears, can go from tears to laughing because I'm not interacting with anyone. But that thing is threatening me directly. Focused body language going, threats, threats, yes, and it non-interactive. Anyway, so I wrote a story that was like a sequel to Bright. How does that relate to Dunny in this instance? So I do like class warfare as a topic, but only when it is, again, even class warfare is only taken when there is no other choice. When it's like you're not even allowed to live in the place where you grow up. You're not even allowed to have a norm. You're not even allowed to engineer your own solutions. You're not even allowed to come up with your own language. You're not even allowed to create your own music. You're not even allowed to talk to bodies in your environment of your own choice. And even when you're not allowed to do all those things, if you could just not bother anybody and eat and sleep and grow old and die, even then you would not engage in class warfare. But when you're not allowed to do that, then class warfare. And that's, the Atris and Catherine and her people, they were not allowed to be themselves. They had to worship this guy Gen, and Atris and Catherine could not be boyfriend and girlfriend because Gen was like a patriarchal harvester of young females, and that's no good. That's no good. Who cares about good or evil? That's not concurrent with popular American values. That doesn't allow for her to make her own decisions in an open and free marketplace. What do you guys think? Do you think that the older brother from Cirrus and Akanar belongs to Gen? And do you think that when Catherine was in Riven, that Gen held himself back, he that thinks that he is a deity? Who are the crazy, greedy ones? There's Cirrus, and there's Yisha. You know what I mean? You wanna approach MYST from an austere and very stringent set of realism standards. I beat you. I defeated you at your own game of canon that you can't comprehend story because you can't put yourself in a narrative because you don't escape, you don't get out, you don't go in for escapism, right? So what is narrative? What is story? That doesn't matter. Canon. And then arguing about canon, right? Fighting, fight. And then when it is story, it's Mary Sue so hard that no one can even criticize you that you're Marty Stew, Mary Stewing, suing. I did not know that I looked like Superman as a boy. And then as a teenager, I went in for representation and I was like, man, John Leguizamo's not in enough movies. We need more Puerto Ricans. And then in my later teen years, in my adulthood, 18, 19, then that became the discipline of my enjoyment of culture. The discipline was, am I represented? Are other people represented? Am I in? Am I holding that media to a standard that it is fun? That way it can be marketable. That way people can buy it. Yeah, take this character out. She's got the biggest, most sensitive ear, and she's slowly backing up on top of the yeah. She's like hi, I'm the wilderness, and I'm the biggest, most sensitive ear, and I fought from the wilderness to get to the center of civilization so that I could say that you're not doing it right because I'm mommy. That's not my mother. Sorry. My mom, I told my mom one of a story that I wrote, and I was in public when I was reciting it to her through the communication device. And she said, "Oh, EG, be careful, people not to steal your ideas." And that command spun me up into such a fervor, but it happened so fast that I had to like reality check reality. And I said, "Mom, the idea that somebody could steal my movie ideas and that that's a bad thing and that I should try to avoid having people steal my movie ideas, that requires for me to believe that there is a way that I could bypass and navigate all of the class barriers that prevent myself or anyone that's come from where I have come from and anyone who holds the values and the liveliness that I hold actually making money creatively in the public arena." And if I were to believe that, and I did, and that's why I know this from life experience, it would almost kill me, if not kill me. That trying to act as if it is real, that I could keep the boy, the young man, me, that I could keep me, so that the me that is unenfranchised could be enfranchised. That doesn't work. Everything that passes for that story that the unenfranchised boy becomes enfranchised is blatantly fictitious. And whatever little bits that are the exception, that they aren't blatantly fictitious, they are exceptionally complex, so that they are entirely something else that we have to call another word for it, duplicitous. Meaning that when you get down to it, it still doesn't want to be one thing. I don't have short term memory right now, so I have to rely on my own um, past skill in building a set of what you would call obsessions that, from their own strength, remind me of themselves. So, one of the things about MYST is that it's called an obsession. And I tolerated this playful accusation that it was an obsession until it being called an obsession became an indictment and something that would take away my freedom. And then I said, is it really an obsession? Why does it look like an obsession? Because it has this tremendous emotionality, this tremendous amount of focus, and because it's a very difficult thing, MYST. It's a very fringe or a very niche thing, MYST. And I said, well, why does, if it's not an obsession, then why does it have the intensity of the focus and the importance that is assigned to it and all that stuff? And I said, oh, because it is the culmination of a whole bunch of different skill sets and a whole bunch of different, very complicated streams of work. A lot of things came together for this thing to exist. And it is sort of the end, it is sort of the last word on um, late 90s simulation based entertainment. And not only is it the last word on late 90s nonviolent interactive entertainment, but it is also sort of at the pinnacle between uh, computer interfaces, something that was super important because people just couldn't understand how to use filing systems. People just couldn't remember where to save things, or how to use programs, or how to move things from one place to another. And there was this thing called HyperCard, and then HyperCard enabled the internet. And because the internet was coming into existence, as everyone was economically motivated to be very, to have a lot of foresight and to really anticipate and predict and and to sort of get ahead of it, that MYST was sort of the culmination of what HyperCard was capable of in terms of giving people things that they could understand spatially. No, I'm getting a collection of mindless, on the edge of being offended bodies. Like it's like a coffee shop of third world country lobotomized human landmines. As I as I nonchalantly just pass through themes and stories and concepts and paradigms, all while looking at words that say FOR space KIDS in medium green and medium blue, so that I can remember visually that I can't barely see that, and children love those two colors together. While constantly processing a never-ending reality, that what I'm saying has no value because I am poor. So I am constantly processing the gaslighting expectation of uh, continuity of misery. Oh, and the environment is also conforming to caste. That is to say, you're in the TV show that you are in, and if you want things in your life to change, then the people in your life have to change, What you do in your story show has to change, etc., etc., etc. It's just another complicated instruction. That doesn't work either. It does, but it doesn't. You have to walk. The reason why these empty-headed, mindless zombies are walking butt backwards towards me is because walking butt backwards works. I'm thinking about tacky steampunk tropes like the laws of physics being ignored so that a 700-pound wrought iron stove can somehow, with water pressure and steam, move a robot that is made out of a 700-pound wrought iron stove and another ton of oak, big 5x5 chunks of oak and pirates and ocean ships for some reason. For some reason, we got to put this story in the middle of a bunch of salt water. All this metal technology is gonna be on top of a bunch of salt water for some reason. Well, there's a video game that would have been a really the best GameCube game to ever exist. Uh, it's called Dishonored, and if it was on the GameCube, it would have been too good. It would have gotten sabotaged. It would have been like Chronicles of Riddick or Beyond Good and Evil or Jet Set Radio Future or Phantom Crash. And if it would have been on the Xbox, it would have been like Halo. It would have been the Halo of its time. Instead of Space Marines, we would have had like steampunk steampunk demonology ninjas, pirate ship demonology ninjas with steampunk weapons. Because he turns into like he can like turn into like a fart and go into a fish or a rat. It's just in the game Dishonored. I'm like, ugh. I'm trying to imagine people saying, "Well, what kind of MYST game would you make?" Or, "Well, what there's something I didn't or like there's something that I didn't guess that they're waiting for me to say because that's what I would need to say." Like, I think we're done, man. I can't imagine this being anything other than socially ostracized and gaslit and poopied on. I can't imagine. The only thing I can imagine is all of society rearranging itself so that you guys are able to actually have relationships that aren't in a pecking order, that are natural, communal, friendly, and functional, just so that you could tell me that I don't, even though you don't, and I can.